So yeah, it's now mid-November, and despite having fitted these, to be honest, quite rubbish handguards, it's still getting a little bit nipsy on the old fingers for riding. And because I want to still be riding, it's time to swap these pieces of rubber uselessness for these beauties of rubber warmerousness. The first step is to get the old grips off. So now to free up this grip here, because it's glued to the bar, I'm just going to stick a nice thin screwdriver up its tailpipe, work it around between bar and the grip. Try and break as much of that adhesion as possible, and hopefully I should be able to twist that off. And as the over-enthusiastic punter said to the experienced hooker, the rubber just popped off. Now for grip number 2, shove the screwdriver in, work it round. Repeat as before, but obviously the problem is now when we twist it this way, the throttle grip moves. So we're not getting any purchase there, so we need to go the other way, because you don't want to be crudding too hard on that, because I don't know what the deal is with bump stops in here. The last thing you want to do is be stretching or straining your throttle cables, which is asking for trouble in the future. Of course, the lazy option is just to cut them off, but you never know when you might need a handlebar grip later. For example, when selling your old bike and you want to keep the heated grips to put onto your new bike. What of course really doesn't help is that it's about 7 degrees out here, and there's no heating in this garage. So just like the Incredible Hulk in Amsterdam's red light district, I'm battling with tight rubber. So what I'm going to do is get a slightly longer, fatter screwdriver. Come on, you sod, get off. Oh, yep. And there we have it. That was a workout. So now I need to get the new grips on in their place. Remembering to take note of the fact that the throttle grip has a much bigger hole than the other grip to account for the throttle tube thingy. Now what is of course a bit perhaps helpful, also maybe a bit annoying, is that that's considerably looser on there, so we're going to have to glue it in place. But first of all, I'll make sure it's as clean as possible by using some of my best friends, the handy Brillenputztuch. This is basically just poor man's alcohol wipe, just to make sure that there's no grease or oil on there. Inside of the grip here as well. Actually, I'm not entirely sure just how well these things are going to work, as when I took them off of the Kawasaki, this grip decided it didn't want to let go of the handlebars, and it's kind of torn itself to pieces a little bit. But luckily it seems to be only beyond where the heating element starts, so hopefully it'll be alright. Anyway, that's clean, this is clean. So then I'm going to use some common, ordinary, garden, lesser spotted super glue, splurge it onto the throttle tube there. Don't need to go too crazy because it's sliding the grip on. It's going to smear the stuff around. Careful, like a grown-up, to put the lid back onto the super glue. We're going to need that again in a minute, so we don't want it drying out. And then slide our grip onto the throttle tube, giving it a bit of a twist just to spread the super glue around a bit. But you do need to be relatively swift with this stage because the glue does start to grip quite quickly. Don't also want to go completely up against the throttle body here, because if you get any glue on that and it sticks, that's going to be disastrous. Now, this is too high at the moment. I want the cable to be about level with the throttle cables here. Just twist it around a little bit, making sure that when it's at full rotation you have got enough clearance to get good braking force on your brakes there. If it interferes with that, that's going to be very dangerous, and the last thing you want is to be impeding your own braking ability. Although, let's be honest, how many people are going to be at full throttle and braking at the same time? Oh, I think that will do. It feels like it's already pretty solidly stuck. I'm going to trim this crappy bit off the end actually. I'd rather have the grip a little bit too short than flapping around in the wind. It's not the tidiest, but it's cheaper than buying new grips. Now we come around to the other side. Same procedure as always. A bit of clean, the grip a bit of a clean, bit of super glue on the handlebar, and then slide the grip onto the handlebar. And this one is considerably tighter, but still a lot easier to slide on than the stock rubber grips. Get that into position so that the cable can come tidily underneath the switchgear here, and also make sure that the clutch lever complete all of its travel without being bothered by this weird L-shaped outcrop on the grip there. Now, ironically, because I bought the Adventure model of these grips, this is a more sporty bike, the grips are much shorter, so it looks like I might actually have to trim this one off a bit anyway. There you go, that is not even vaguely straight. So while we're waiting for the glue to completely dry before we start buggering around with anything else, you get the bar end weights back on. And now I see that I actually didn't need to trim that off at all, because the bar end weights have got a protrusion, if you will. Brilliant, so that's going to look crap for the rest of all eternity with a big gap there. Oh, you plonker. Or alternatively, old parts come to the rescue, stick the bar end weights that I had on the Versys onto this one because there's no shoulder. They'll just go straight up against the grips. Using the original bolt, yeah, that's much better. A bit of a gap, but happy with the way that looks. There's the right one on. Nice. So now we need to concern ourselves with where the control unit's going to go. I don't know if you remember, but on the Versys I used this little bracket which was attached via the bolts which held on the left-hand mirror and the clutch lever. On the Phaser here, it's a very different setup. It's just got one pinch bolt and the whole thing is one unit, so there's none of that to use for this. Perhaps I could just put it on this side. Up there's a bit useless. Looks like there's almost enough space on the triple tree, but just not quite. Stick it on top of the brake fluid reservoir, but then I won't be able to get to these screws very easily if I wanted to undo that. Right then, what I think I'm going to do, first off, to get rid of this bracket, I'm going to take my trusty hacksaw, trim it off. Yet another one of my glass cleaning cloths. Give this a nice good clean. Give this a nice good clean. Then I'm going to use some of this 3M sticky stuff, which is basically the same stuff that you use to stick action camera mounts onto your helmets and things. And I'm going to stick that to the brake reservoir, giving me enough space to get a screwdriver in to take that lid off there. Incidentally, if you're worried about how sticky this sticky stuff actually is, I actually used a few pieces from this exact roll to hang the towel rail in our bathroom by sticking it to the tiled wall, and after a year it's still holding strong. Now we can screw the control unit back onto the mount here and then peel off the backing, get it as central as possible and stick it on. Yeah, already that feels pretty solid. And also it's important to remember that this cable will be connected to the rest of the cable loom, so even if that were to come off, it's not going to go anywhere. I think I'm happy with that. So now I need to deal with connecting all of these up and then connecting this end to the battery, which is under here. Okay, quick dramatical change of lighting here. Dwindling lighting conditions last night stopped play unfortunately, so had to leave it, come back, and now the sun is out, so hopefully might even get to go and test them today. Also gave me time to go and treat myself to this little beauty. Look at that. Finally got myself a Vera ratchet and bit set worth having and worth using. Oh, I'm excited about this. It's so small and so perfect. But anyway, now we've got the grips on, we need to get this off, get under the tank so we can run the cabling through. Now that the tank is free, we need to run the cables somehow through here, and I'm planning to run my cables down this side, follow this big loom back to the battery. First of all, we need to come around the front of the forks between the instrument panel. Looks like that's going to be quite difficult, so what I'm going to actually do is take this front headlight unit off so we can get better access in there. Now, ordinarily, on a completely standard FZ1-N, you'd want to be holding the bottom of the light unit here when you take this final bolt out, because that should be loose. But because I've got this Air Max screen on, the fork pinch bolts are actually holding the whole thing on still. So now we should be able to pull this off to the front, and it's still connected by the power cable, which a little bit of a push and a pull, and then the magic happens, and then the light unit is off. So now we can see far better what we're dealing with here. The right hand grip, I'm going to follow this loom through here, poke it through this cable holder bar thingy. The left grip, follow this loom through here. There's a lot of scaffolding here for cables. I'm glad to see that. Okay, so now with this one, I'm going to need to be coming across to here, and I will attach this to that cable there just to make sure that as the bars move it doesn't come anywhere near the headstock of the frame. And then the control unit, looks like the waterproof sheathing has come a bit loose, so I'm going to quickly whack a new cable tie around that. Any excuse for another cable tie, hey kids? Down behind for the neater look. Following in here with this loom. It's going to be tight. It's a triple-headed hydra of a cable, this one. Oh, I've got the bloody plug wrapped around the other one now. There we go, that's all three of them through. All the slack together. And this one also is going to come across the front here through this piece of scaffolding while we're here. That all together nice and tidy, lovely. And then we need to connect some of this nonsense up. We've got the left or right grip, doesn't really matter. And we've got the other left or right grip, also doesn't really matter. And that leaves just the power cable, which is going to be coming from the back end shortly. And same worries as I had before with the Versys. This is all very non-waterproof, non-protected. Don't like it very much at all. Cable tie it up a bit to give it some support. What I would ideally like to do, and what I would recommend, is once you've got the power cable on, is to stick some heat shrink over this whole thing. Heat shrink it all together. Sadly, in my garage I have no power, so I have no way of heating heat shrink, so I'm going to leave it as it is for now, and I will come back another day when I've got access to some power, actually heat shrink this together. Trim these off. Get that one as well while we're here, shall we? So now we get to the good bit where we need to find some power. Prop the tank up with my handy mallet. As always, being careful not to stress the fuel line there, because you can break these plastic clips and then you're buggered. What I'd ideally like to do is to come through this gap here. Incidentally, I know some of you phaser owners are screaming at me that this is the air intake, restricting air into the airbox. And I think you could argue that you are possibly right, but at the same time, I haven't done the airbox mod on this bike and the hole is so small, I don't think I'm really going to be restricting anything. There we go, that's nice and neat and tidy, isn't it? So at this point, let's go to the other end, stick the power on. My little sexual chocolate toolkit, bloody love this. Got a little screwdriver handle as well. I think this is going to be coming with me on the next tour for sure. Might even stick it on the front just so I can look at it lovingly while I ride. Now this is what we've got at the other end. There's 2 ring terminals to go onto the battery, a fuse, check that it's in there and that it's in good nick. It's a 5 amp fuse, looks good. And then cable which goes along, connects to the rest of the mess. Okay, that's a bit tight for a screwdriver, fear not. But we have sockets too, love it, worth every penny. Now, as we can see by the red colouring and the plus, that's the positive terminal, which is the one also which has the fuse on it. Over the top of my battery connection, negative terminal on. Then, to run our cable through underneath the tank mount, along here, next to all of this nonsense, connect it up to the control box and the heated grips, and poke all of this gubbins to the gap down here, like that. Then we just need to tidy all this nonsense up, take up the slack by looping it, and then I'm going to hijack this clip here, put the whole thing all together. See, although it does seem like I'm a cable tie deviant, I do try and minimise. And then once again, just to be sure, cable tie around here. And then we just need to tidy this end up. This all looks quite hideous. Put another cable tie around there to stop it from coming unraveled and getting caught in the seat lock mechanism, because that would be quite frustrating. Of course, when I say quite, I mean intensely. So that's that all tucked under there nice and neatly. Stick one round here to keep our loomage together here too, but we can be a little bit more brutal with how tight to the switch gear we grip this one, because this grip doesn't have to move anywhere. With this one we have to leave enough slack for the cable to go underneath as we accelerate. One here at the front, because that looks awful the way it loops up like that. Oh, just awful, darling. Here we go, lovely, nice and tidy. Wouldn't even know they were there if you hadn't seen the video. The last snippety snip's done. Snippety doodah. All finished. We just need to put it all back together. We can actually go out and enjoy some of this sunshine. Tank down. Need to put the face back on, but don't forget to plug the lights back in, because that would be very frustrating once you've bolted everything back together. You find out you haven't plugged the poor girl's eyeballs in. And we're done. Heated grips are in. And, well, let's see if they work, shall we? So the idea with these is they're connected directly to the batteries, which means when you turn the bike off, it senses that the bike has stopped running and it cuts power to the heated grips so you don't run your battery dead. Start her up. Look at that, we have power to the controller at the very least, so let's whack it up and see if we get some heat out of the grips. Yep, and still cold. Oh, I'm getting something. Feeling a soothing warmness seeping into my phalanges. Yeah, they are definitely heating up. And then, as I turn the engine off, wait for it, still waiting for it, still waiting for it. Oh, come on, we can't be waiting for it all day. There it is. Battery saving mode just blinked, which tells us that it sensed the power source has changed from the engine running to the engine being off. Now what the blinking light means is that it's cut the power to the grips. They're no longer heating, even though this is still on. And after a set amount of time, this will then switch itself off completely. Brilliant, so there we go.